So today's workshop is on getting familiar with the different aspects of the military life and understanding the culture and environment that are important to veterans and how to help them transition. And the speaker today is Elizabeth Heger, and she's with the Soldiers Project. It's a nonprofit organization, and they provide free confidential psychological services for veterans and their family members.
So what I'd like to do today is just to provide an overview of today's military. Some of this may be second nature to some of you, others it may not. Talking about just very, very briefly about the different branches, because it does help put things into context, understanding sort of the military culture, the overall military culture and what that is. And then of course, understanding all the different sorts of issues, the family issues, community issues, individual issues that our service members will face when they return home. And we'll talk also about sort of the deployment cycle that they go through and all the emotional issues that are attached with that. And then of course, resources available. And I know that there are a bunch of resources that have been made available to you here. I have a few on the slide, and we have a bunch more on our website at thesoldiersproject.com. So military culture. So you have all these branches of the military. They're here to protect us. They're here to make sure that on land we're protected, in the air, whatever it may be. And there are certain roles and missions. When people go into the military, they are given a structure that they have not been familiar with, a structure that they have to get used to, and it becomes very second nature to them. What happens is when someone tries to go into the military, you all may be familiar, they have to take the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. This actually allows them to be placed in the appropriate job within the military. And so they have to make sure that they can meet all the criteria. Just because they take this doesn't mean that they will necessarily be put into a position and enlisted in the Army or the Air Force, Marines, whatever it may be. But that's what happens. They need to make sure that they have a job, they have a duty, and this is what they're tasked to do. So their objective, basically, when they are active members, what their main objective is that they need to make sure that they do whatever their commander says. They follow the rules. There's a very large rank structure. It's sort of one of the last known caste systems that we have. There's ranks. You follow your rank. It tells you sort of who you can socialize with, who you can't socialize with, where you're going to go, where you're going to be living. The higher the rank, obviously, the better. You may get better housing, you may get better transportation, whatever it may be. But in the military, it is there are very rigid guidelines that they must follow. So there are a couple different roles. There are the officer roles and the NCO roles. So the officer roles obviously are the ones that they lead, they plan, they organize. They're the ones that are actually telling everyone what to do. They are really the higher ups. You have your NCOs, which are usually your warrant officers. And I'm correct, right? The warrant officers are the NCOs. They're the ones. They're not officers. They're not commissioned officers, but they are the ones that also they implement, they lead, they train the men and women underneath them. And of course, you have your enlisted ones. Those are the ones that I say are the worker bees. Those are the ones that really get on the ground, really do the job, and get involved. So they execute everything that their higher ups will actually say that they're supposed to do. One of the things that we've learned is that when officers give orders and they say, well, I want you to do this, it's basically their way of saying, well, I order you to do this and don't question it. And so this whole structure sets them up. I mean, they have to get used to it. They have to understand the rules. They have to understand what they're up against, and they can't deter from that. So basically there is a military family among every branch. Military is different, the Army is different from the Marines is different from the Air Force, et cetera, et cetera. There is a uniqueness. There's specific language that they use. When they talk about going downrange means that they're actually being deployed somewhere. There's specific military language that is learned, and it's their own culture. They have their own family. You've seen movies like The Band of Brothers, and it actually is their own unique family. There is a big sense of community. That's one of the things that we hear a lot with our soldiers that are coming back, is that they need to protect their brothers, they need to protect their family unit, and they don't want to stray from that. When they come back, it's actually very difficult for them because they're still in that mind frame. They have to be able to understand that they're not in that world anymore, but it's very difficult, especially those that go over in combat and have been wanting to protect, the men and women that they're over there with. The military is sort of something that's inbred in them. We have a job, we do it every day because we like to do it. The military is actually something that gets ingrained in someone's soul. It's sort of how they get to that sense of camaraderie, the sense of community among their fellow, fellow service members. There's also sort of a warrior ethos that can become a little bit troublesome when they come home. They have good emotional strength when they're over there. They get on the battlefield, they're ready to go, they're ready to protect each other and do what they need to do. And when they come home, they're still in that mind frame, so it's very difficult for them to turn that off. So we have to realize that when they come home, we have to help them work through that. And that's one of the things that we try to do, is we try to educate not only the community, but also educate the therapists in understanding that they are in a different mind frame, and it's very difficult for them to turn it off. Again, I think I mentioned this before. I mean, when you're in the military, you're told what to wear. You're told how to speak. You're told who you can socialize with, who you can't socialize with. You're told where you can go if you're on post. You're told, you can go over here, but you can't go over here. They have the officers' clubs that only the officers can go to. So it's a very structured and very hierarchical system that they have. And then, of course, the commanders are actually responsible for all of the people below, for all of the servicemen and women below them. So they have to protect them. They have to understand that if something happens in their family, they have to be told about it. They're going to make sure that that there's good order and discipline among the team that they're looking after. And it can be something very personal if someone is not feeding their children, or if they're arguing with their wife, or if they got in trouble with the law. The commander's going to know about it, and he's going to do something about it, because he doesn't want discipline and order to go astray in his unit. So he needs to make sure that he oversees that. So one of the things that the movie clip that I want to show you is from a movie called Least Among Saints, and the producer and director Marty Papazian is actually the star, and his character Anthony has actually just come back from Iraq, and he's dealing with a lot of different issues. So I'm going to show you one scene first.
He never came back.
I'm here. And his overall nervousness and demeanor, that he might have symptoms of PTSD, but it's just not being addressed.
And we'll talk more about, and I'll show you another scene of what he's gone through. Because what happens is, there's this whole, our military, they all come from families. They all have a brother, they all have a sister, they all have a friend. And so they all have to prepare for it. So what I have here is sort of the cycle, the deployment cycles of what happens. And by deployment cycles, I mean anywhere from the time that they actually start getting training to the time that they actually come back and maybe are redeployed, and then come back again. It depends, the length of deployment depends on the branch. Every branch is different. Army and Marines have the highest rate of redeployment, so they're the ones that go back again and again and again. Many are finding, that multiple deployments are obviously wreaking havoc on the psyche. They are causing a lot more mental health issues, because they're seeing a lot more. So the first part of the deployment cycle is our training. So what are they doing? What are they going to be doing when they go wherever they're being deployed to? Recently, obviously, in Iraq and Afghanistan. There is usually a sense of excitement. They're excited about going. They're going to be deployed. The family seems to be pretty happy. And then you get to the point where it's pre-deployment, where what they call the mobilization stage. This is where they start getting more specifics about what's going to happen, where they're going, where they're going to be stationed. There starts to be a lot of anxiety within the family. If there are children present, the children maybe start acting out. They're not sure where mom or dad is going. The service member will actually start distancing themselves, which is a normal human reaction that we have when we're uncomfortable. And then you move into your deployment cycle. The deployment stage, when they actually are going to be deployed. And when they get over there, when they get where they're going, they usually start off very excited. They're excited to be there. It's a new opportunity. And then, of course, the loneliness, the scared feelings, all that sets in when they're over there. The sustainment phase or the employment phase is actually when they're sort of in the throes of things. They have a routine, they know what they're doing, everything seems to be okay. They have a new support system that's being established with the men and women that are over there with them. They're all in this together. That sense of community really, really starts to form because they're in a new home. They're away from their regular home. And then, of course, you have your redeployment, which is the next part of the cycle, where they actually are starting to wind down. They're gonna come home, and they're transferring the duties to someone else who might be staying there, and they get a little bit scared because it's not something. It's going to be an unfamiliar territory that they're not going to be used to, especially if you have those men and women that are. That have children that maybe weren't born when the service member left, and so it's a little bit of a sense of excitement, but it's also being very nervous. I remember speaking with an individual. He is a retired Marine, and was over in Iraq in 2004, and I was speaking with him, and he was telling me sort of how. When he was over there, that it was scary to come back. He had sort of turned himself off when he was over there, and came back and thought he was just going to throw himself into it. He was going to try to get as much support as he could, but it was very difficult because he didn't feel needed, he didn't feel wanted, and so the transition for him was very difficult. Post-deployment is actually when they actually arrive home, when the service member arrives home, and they're back in their routine. They're back in their normal routine here. That can be somewhat exciting for some. It can be not exciting for some. So it just depends on, do they have issues? Did they have issues before they actually were deployed? Sometimes you have men and women who we're dealing with substance abuse issues, with perhaps a pending separation from a spouse or a partner, and they were concerned about that before, and they know they have to come back to that situation, so it makes it that much more stressful because they're not going to be in sort of their new community and their new bonds that they've formed. So I'd like to see. Or I'd like to ask, what are there issues that you all see in veterans that you work with?
I think listening to the veterans explain their frustration and make excuses for not being able to get a job when they've had experience doing something similar in the military, and they can't figure out, they don't know why employers are not hiring them, and they have, you know, family and other things going on. So, and they themselves, you know, make excuses to just keep going.
There are so many resources and so many services available for them. It's hard for them to decide where they should start. You know, do they start with the career center or one-stop center? Do they start with the community college? Where do they start? So that's been a challenge in just trying to help in that way.
And I think it is. I mean, I think they're getting used to a lifestyle that is not familiar to them. And a lot of them do feel like outsiders. They don't feel like they fit in. They feel like, you know, and then they have the other issues of the anxiety and the stress and, you know, and you know, sometimes, you know, loud noises. And I mean, that's one of the things that we try to do with the educators and talking with school personnel and, you know, faculty, administration at the local colleges. One thing that we're starting is trying to go out to employers so that they can understand that this person may not operate like you're used to. They may have reactions to things that you're not comfortable in dealing with, and they may not react, you know, to a situation like you would react. It may be a little bit, you know, a little bit more of a dramatic, you know, and by no means is that lessening what it means to them, but you know, we need to help others understand that these veterans are actually going through something that many of us will never ever comprehend. Only 1% of the population is actually in the military. You know, the other 99% of us are actually trying to figure out and understand what they've actually been through.
Yeah, I have transitioning veterans, as he said, come to California. A Marine met his wife in Texas. He transitions back home to his single mother with his wife and a small kid that became part of the family now. Lands here, the mother's not working, and then they roll out into the car homeless. Then they come in and he's transitioning to his new wife and newborn, and all of them need jobs, all of them need health services, all of them need mental health, because he was in the infantry. She has no clue of what California's about. And you sit there and you go, okay, and they're really open and honest, touching from their heart directly, okay, what are you going to do for me now? Yeah, and I sit there and go, wow, okay. And you know, as you said, because a lot that my mom doesn't understand because I haven't got a job yet. But I just got off in October. He came into my office like 3 weeks after he was just released from the military, fresh right off Afghanistan, right? So mom doesn't understand. He's like in this transition, all these multiple layers, and you sit there without this connection of, well, okay, I'll send him to a homeless shelter, I'll call US Vets, I'll call Beyond Shelters, I'll do this. Oh, he wants to go to school, she needs a job, but she doesn't know California. She needs a resume, she needs help, but oh, they need child care center and all this stuff. And you're just like, you know, on the phone there for like an hour and a half until you realize that you get them settled. Beyond Shelters was very happy because they had a family unit that they could take in immediately. And I brought him back in and work with him. And I'm happy to say now he's working with the VA. He's an outreach specialist now. And we were doing a recruitment for Vaughn's, and she was a spouse of military. And she said, oh, I've done cashiering before, and now she has a job as a cashier with Vaughn's. And they're both saving up their money to move to an apartment finally. So that took me like about 6 months to get there, just to get there. You know, so it's not an easy job because you're dealing with multiple issues, not just one. Oh, I want to go to school, or you know, I just need a job. But when they come to you, it's like this whole top four
It's a
issues.
layer of issues that you're dealing with.
Exactly.
You know, anxiety, depression, loss of body parts. I mean, these are all sort of the individual challenges they're dealing with. Right now, there was a recent study that just came out that there are 22 suicides a day, veterans. It was 18 when they did the study a few years ago, and now it's 22 a day. And it's due to our men and women having to go over there over and over and over again. You know, you also have, as I mentioned before, you know, when they go over there, you know, they have this anger, anxiety, this avoidance, you know, that this is what they're dealing with, because basically what they've had to do is they've had to dehumanize the enemy. You know, they're not, you know, and that's one of the problems that Anthony, towards the end, I don't think we're gonna have time for the last scene, but that's one of the things that he dealt with, was that there was a family that he ran into, and he pulled this girl out of the car, and you know, that was one of the things that he was struggling with, because he didn't know how to dehumanize it, and he felt, I did something wrong, you know, so he was beating himself up. About 30% of our service members come back with mental health issues, so 70% of them don't. We just hear more about the ones that actually have those issues. You know, females, someone asked about females earlier, and females are actually more, they're more ready to ask for therapy, but it's getting to that point and actually, and actually asking for therapy. One of the things that happens is when females come back, they have to go back into that mom role, or the caregiver role that they were in before they actually went over there. So it makes it a lot more difficult for them to reach out and get help. And then you have you have the men and women. It happens to men as well with the military sexual trauma. That has been more and more. You see more and more cases of that every day. So we're having men and women deal with that. And getting help for that and feeling okay. I had actually a young cadet call me from Virginia who had been sexually assaulted about 2 weeks ago from her commander, and she didn't know what to do. And she didn't know where to go because she didn't have anywhere to turn. She was 19, and so you just see it more and more. I'm not sure, it's funny because my father was in the Army for 22 years, and I asked him about military sexual trauma back then. He said, it happened, but you didn't hear about it as much, and I'm not sure why. I guess I always ask those questions, why I don't understand. And then you have, your traumatic brain injuries for those that have experienced IEDs. Which are the improvised explosive devices, the homemade bombs. You have a lot of individuals dealing with that as well. With regards to the family challenges, we mentioned it. Definitely the violence, domestic violence. We have intimacy problems, the lack of support. A lot of times you have children that don't know their parent that has come home, and so they act out. They're not used to it. They're not used to that parent being there. And because of the culture that our service members have been in when they've been, especially when they've been deployed and everything's rank and structure, they come home thinking, oh, well, I'm the leader of the family and you need to do this, you need to do this. And our service members need to recognize that it's not, the spouse and the children are not their subordinates, and that's something that they basically have to turn off. And we have to help them do that because they have to get used to the new environment that they're in. And then, of course, our community problems. We discussed this a little while earlier, is that, they do have difficulty in the workplace. Employers aren't familiar with what or how to deal with a service member who has the post-traumatic stress disorder issues or has the anger issues or is having problems, legal problems for one reason or another. So it's important for us to educate others about what, and educate, the employers, and I'm saying this, our organization needs to go out there more and educate about how they can deal with service members who might be dealing with these types of issues. Because I think it's super, super important for employers to be supportive to our veterans, to make sure that they can succeed, because they do have a lot of transferable skills. And it is frustrating for them when they have, you know, a lot of responsibilities when they're overseas, and then they come back and they don't fit in. I mean, it just sort of adds to everything else, and layers and layers and layers.
Michelle, the next session starts at 11:30.
Oh, okay. So the last one is just the barriers to treatment. The one after that is just about the resources, but you know, obviously there is a fear of failure for service members when they come home. The stigma of getting mental health services. They don't want to be categorized as somebody that has a problem and that can't handle it because they functioned so well when they were with their military community and their military culture. So it's just a matter of making sure that we are realistic with them and you know, helping them understand that it's okay how they're feeling. There is a list of, I know other people are coming in, so I don't want to, and I know y'all have other sessions to go to, but you know, just be aware, helping them not making them not feel shameful for how they're feeling, you know, be non-judgmental. I mean, all sort of the normal things that I know all of you are familiar with. And don't get them to talk about it unless they don't want to, because that's super, super important. Not to force them to talk about their service and what's happened to them. So I'm gonna let you all go, but thank you so much.